The church doors groaned open like a final breath being released. For a split second, the entire room fell silent. So silent, you could hear the scrape of my heels against the marble floor. The light from outside poured in behind me, slicing through the dim, candlelit sanctuary like a spotlight. People turned. Gasps. A glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered. Someone whispered my name like a curse. Like a ghost had just stepped out of a dream they tried too hard to forget. There I was, alive, wearing black, walking straight down the aisle toward a coffin topped with my photograph. I stopped just short of it. My heels echoed one last time across the stone. I looked at the people who had once called me daughter, sister, niece. People who had written my obituary, organized this very service, bowed their heads in fake mourning while they reaped everything I had left behind. I cleared my throat. I heard I was dead. I said, voice calm and cold. So I came to correct the story. My name is Vivian Cross, and 3 years ago, my family buried me, without digging a grave. Today I'm back to collect what they thought I'd never live to claim. Before we jump in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 3 years earlier, I was making coffee in my tiny apartment above a bookstore in Florence, the kind with creaky floorboards, sleepy mornings, and the smell of roasted beans that clung to your clothes like comfort. It was supposed to be a normal day. I had a shift at the cafe down the street, a new sketch I wanted to finish, and a letter I'd been meaning to write, though I didn't know who to send it to anymore. My life had grown small, soft around the edges. There was loneliness, yes, but also peace. And when you've lived through enough chaos, peace, even the quiet kind, starts to feel like a miracle. Until my phone buzzed. It was a message from a name I hadn't seen in years, Mrs. Langford. She was my high school literature teacher, the kind of woman who made dead poets feel alive. I hadn't heard from her since I left the country. So seeing her name? My stomach dropped before I even opened the message. It read, "I'm so sorry about your parents. I can't believe what I saw today." I froze. No punctuation. No explanation. Wrote back immediately. "What happened?" No reply. Just 3 blinking dots. And then a video file. I opened it with shaking hands. The screen lit up with stained glass windows, us and the soft glow of candles. A church. Familiar. Too familiar. St. Catherine's back home. The one I was baptized in. The one where my mother once sang in the choir. And where every family milestone had played out like rehearsed tradition. It was a funeral. Mourners filled the pews in black. Floral arrangements spilled over every surface. A massive portrait rested on an easel beside a closed white coffin. My portrait. Me. Hair curled just so. A photo from my graduation. The caption underneath read, "In loving memory of Vivian Elise Cross, 1993-2020. I couldn't breathe. My father stood at the pulpit, speaking in a voice I hadn't heard in years. He talked about grace, about loss, about how no parent should have to bury a child. He dabbed his eyes with a folded handkerchief. My mother sat beside him, dabbing hers too, her face the picture of poised devastation. People were crying. My cousins, my childhood best friend, they were all there, all convinced I was dead, and none of them had tried to find me. I stared at the screen, my own face staring back from a casket I'd never seen. And for the first time since I disappeared, I realized they hadn't just disowned me. They'd buried me alive. The night after I saw the video, I didn't sleep. I sat on the edge of my bed, still in the same clothes, staring at my reflection in the window. The city outside moved on. Cars passed, lights flickered, life carried forward. But inside me, something had cracked open. They hadn't just grieved me. They had erased me. There's a difference. When someone grieves, there's love wrapped in the loss. But when they erase you, it's calculated, cold, intentional. I opened my laptop and began to dig. First, I tried logging into my old email. Account deactivated, then my university profile. No records found. I checked the online obituary registry. There it was. My name, birth date, a fabricated car accident in Croatia, listed as the cause of death. That's when I realized they didn't just believe I was gone, quiet. They made it true on paper. They created a version of me that never came back. I didn't have many people left from my old life, but I tried one more person. My Aunt Margot. She used to sneak me chocolates and whisper that I was her favorite, even when no one else noticed me. I called. It rang once, then twice. Then her voice, cold and unfamiliar. "You shouldn't be calling here," I said. "Aunt Margot, it's me, Vivian." Silence. Then a click. She hung up. The air in my apartment felt thinner after that, like I was standing in a world that wasn't mine anymore. I sent a few cautious messages to people I once trusted. Classmates, family friends, even an old neighbor. Most didn't reply. A few asked who I was. But one answer came through. Late that night, it was from Eli, my cousin. He'd always been quiet, the one who never joined the whispers or the drama. I didn't expect him to respond, but when he did, it was just 4 words. "I knew you weren't." I called him instantly. He answered on the first ring. "I knew you weren't dead," he said before I could speak. "But they were so convincing. They said you died in a car crash. They even had documents. I asked questions, but your mom said she wanted to move on. That bringing you up was cruel." I couldn't speak. He lowered his voice. "Vivian, they didn't just pretend you died. They built a life on it. They made you a ghost." I felt the tears sting, but I blinked them back. "Not yet. Can you help me?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "But you need to understand something first." "What?" "They didn't just let you go. They needed you gone." And just like that, the question shifted. Not how they did it, but why. 3 years ago, everything changed in the span of a single afternoon. It started with a missing $85,000, money from a family-held business grant, meant to help me launch my art and design studio. My father had built the grant into our family trust, something my grandparents started decades ago for the most promising descendant of each generation. That descendant had been me, until it wasn't. The money disappeared without a trace. One day it was there, the next, gone. No explanation, no paperwork. No one seemed concerned, except me. I brought it up hesitantly, over dinner. My mother set her fork down slowly, like I'd insulted her favorite hymn. My father folded his napkin with surgical precision. Cecilia, my younger sister, didn't even look up from her wine glass. I remember saying, "I'm not accusing anyone. I just want to know where the money went." Cecilia tilted her head and blinked at me. "Maybe if you didn't mismanage your little projects, you'd still have it." Little projects. That was the first real crack. Later that night, I found the proof. A trail of withdrawals, multiple wire transfers, all connected to an account in Cecilia's name. Clothing boutiques, spa packages, a down payment on a luxury apartment. She had stolen the money. I confronted her. She didn't even deny it. "It was going to waste on you anyway," she said, almost laughing. "You were flailing. I made something of it. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I went to my parents, heart pounding, voice shaking. I showed them the documents, the receipts, the transfers. My mother stared at the papers for less than a minute before pushing them aside. "She's your sister," she said. My father looked at me with the same expression he used when correcting me as a child. Disappointment edged with disgust. "You've embarrassed this family enough," he said, throwing accusations like a child with a tantrum. "I have proof," I said, louder this time. "She took the money." My mother stood. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "It's better to lose one child than to have both at war." And just like that, I understood. They had made a choice, and it wasn't me. The next morning, my bank accounts were frozen. My phone plan was canceled. I came home to find my things boxed up on the porch, my name scraped off the mailbox. I tried, calling. Every number was blocked. I emailed. Every message bounced. Cecilia posted a smiling photo with my parents the next day, captioned, "Grateful for family that never gives up on you." I was erased like a coffee stain on white linen, scrubbed out before it set in. And they did it so quietly, so cleanly. I left the country within the week, not because I wanted to, but because there was nowhere else to go. In the years that followed, I learned how to disappear. I worked under the table at a cafe run by an elderly couple who didn't ask questions. I lived in a walk-up apartment with a leaky faucet and a view of rusted rooftops. I stopped checking Facebook. I stopped looking up my family. But every now and then I dreamed they called, that my mother left a voicemail, trembling with regret, that my father wrote a letter, folded with care, that Cecilia confessed. But the phone never rang. The mailbox stayed empty. Eventually I built a quiet rhythm. I started sketching again, not for clients or galleries, just for myself. I met a woman named Louisa at the corner bookstore, who lent me novels and never asked why I flinched at loud voices. Life wasn't full, but it was mine, and for the first time in years, I belonged to myself. Until I tried to renew my old email. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd use it to retrieve old documents for a freelance job. I entered my password, answered the security questions, and hit submit. A red box flashed across the screen. "This account has been deactivated. Reason: account holder, deceased." My stomach dropped. I tried again. Same result. I checked the recovery options. There was no recovery. My digital identity had been erased. I logged into a public obituary database, not expecting much, just chasing a shadow. And there it was. My name: Vivian Cross. Date of death: April 16th, 2020. Cause: auto accident. International burial. Memorial service held at St. Catherine's Church. I clicked through, stunned. Everything was there. A fake police report, a forged death certificate, a charity fund created in my memory, organized by Cecilia. I couldn't move, couldn't think. All this time I thought I was invisible. But I hadn't vanished. I had been deliberately buried, declared legally dead, stripped of existence. And someone had signed the documents to make it happen. I spent the rest of the night sitting on the floor, knees to my chest, staring at that screen. Outside, the city carried on, but in that tiny room, I unraveled. They hadn't just removed me from their lives. They had rewritten the story, and now they were living comfortably inside the lie, while I, the ghost, watched from the outside. Until that moment, I hadn't thought about going back, but something shifted. A slow, rising clarity. I wasn't a ghost. I was a witness. And soon, I would become the reckoning. The next morning, I called Eli again. He picked up immediately, like he'd been waiting. "I need your help," I said. "Anything," he replied. So I told him everything. About the email, the fake obituary, the death certificate. His silence on the other end was thick, heavy. "They really went that far?" he finally whispered. "Yes," I said. "And I'm going to prove it." We spent the next week gathering everything. My passport, my lease agreements, utility bills, tax filings from Italy, even photos of me with a newspaper dated last month. Anything that proved I was very much alive and had been all along. Eli, bless him, went to the county clerk's office under the guise of genealogy research and confirmed it. A death certificate had been filed under my name. Signed, sealed, official. He sent me a photo. I stared at it for a long time. The signature at the bottom, my mother's. That did something to me I can't quite describe. Not anger, not grief. Something colder, something final. I booked an appointment with a lawyer who specialized in inheritance fraud and estate tampering. Her name was Dahlia Monroe, young, sharp, and with a voice like cut glass. "You want to challenge your own death?" she asked after I laid it all out. I nodded. She leaned back, studying me. "Well, that's a first." "I don't want money," I said. "I want my life back. And I want them to face what they did." Her lips curled into a slow, dangerous smile. "Then let's start digging." Dahlia helped me file an appeal to reverse the death declaration. We drafted affidavits, submitted formal complaints. Quietly, began preparing for a case that could explode into a full-blown criminal investigation. Then, just as we were building momentum, I received a message. No name, no number, just one sentence. "They're holding a public memorial for you this Sunday at St. Catherine's." My stomach twisted. A memorial. 3 years after they declared me dead, they were hosting a grand event in my name. Flowers, speeches, the whole charade. Maybe to keep up the illusion. Maybe to silence whispers. But all I could think was, how poetic, how perfect. If they wanted a performance, I was about to give them a finale they'd never forget. Sunday came cloaked in gray skies. Like the weather, itself knew something wasn't right. I stood across the street from St. Catherine's, dressed in a fitted black coat, gloves, and dark sunglasses. My hair was pulled back in a sleek twist, every strand in place. I looked like a mourner. I looked like someone who belonged. The parking lot was already full. Sleek cars, tinted windows, guests stepping out in designer heels and polished shoes. They came in clusters, hugging, dabbing their eyes, speaking in the hushed tones people reserve for tragedy and theater. From where I stood, I could see the massive photo blown up on an easel by the church doors. My face, smiling, oblivious. The banner above it read, "In loving memory of Vivian Cross forever in our hearts." I wanted to laugh. Instead, I walked, slowly, deliberately, across the street. No one recognized me at first, or maybe they didn't dare believe it. A few heads turned, a few whispers stirred. But it wasn't until I reached the entrance and pushed open the heavy wooden doors that it happened. A gasp. Then another, the kind of sound that spreads like fire in a room full of secrets. The priest, mid-sentence, faltered. My father, standing near the front in a tailored black suit, went pale. My mother's hand flew to her chest, like something had punched the breath from her lungs. Cecilia, in her ivory dress and pearl earrings, looked like she'd seen the devil herself. I walked down the aisle slowly, the click of my heels slicing through silence. Eyes followed me, wide and horrified. Someone dropped their program. Another backed away like they thought touching me might burn. When I reached the altar, I stopped in front of my own photograph. I turned to face them. My name, I said, voice steady, clear, is Vivian Elise Cross. A murmur rippled through the crowd. And I am not dead. Gasps again. A woman clutched her pearls. Someone in the back pulled out their phone. I'm not a ghost. I'm not a story. I'm not a memory. I took a breath. I am a daughter, a sister, and for the last 3 years, I have been buried by the people standing in this room. Not in the ground, but in lies, in silence, in paperwork signed with my mother's name. My mother flinched. I pulled a folder from my bag and held it up. My passport, my lease, my tax returns, photos, dates, proof of life. While you all mourned me, performed me, I was alive, alone, watching you build a life that required me to vanish. The church was dead quiet. Only Cecilia's shallow breathing echoed from the front row. And now, I said, letting the silence stretch, I'm here to reclaim my name, my life, my truth. And I smiled, not because I was happy, but because I was finally visible. No one moved. It was as if the entire church had turned to stone. I looked at them, all of them. The cousins who had reposted tribute photos. The neighbors who had attended the funeral. The family friends who hadn't asked a single question. The choir stood frozen behind the altar. The organist's fingers hovered over the keys but never touched down. I turned my gaze to my father. He didn't say a word, just stared at me like I'd ruined a party he had spent months planning. Then to my mother. Her face pinched, tears caught, somewhere between shame and fury. You filed the death certificate, I said calmly. You forged it. You told the world your daughter was gone. My voice didn't rise. I didn't need to shout. You orchestrated a funeral for someone still breathing. I turned toward Cecilia. She hadn't moved. Not once. You took everything, I said. The grant money, the family trust, my place in this family. You didn't just want me out of the way. You wanted to become me. Cecilia's lips parted, but no words came. And you did it well, I added. At least, until now. I looked out at the room again. So many eyes, some horrified, some ashamed, some wide with the dawning realization that they had been part of a lie. And now, that lie was unraveling in front of them. I set the folder down on the pulpit. The documents fanned out neatly. Evidence of my life. Here's the truth, I said. I was never in a car accident. I never died. I never disappeared. I gestured around the room. You disappeared me. I took one last look at my photograph above the coffin. My smiling face. The image they had chosen to mourn. Then I stepped forward, lifted the framed photo from its stand, and tucked it under my arm. Consider this mine again. I walked back down the aisle, through the pews, past every stunned face, every hand clutching pearls and prayer books. The doors groaned open behind me. The wind caught my coat as I stepped into the gray light of day. And behind me, the bell of St. Catherine's rang, a funeral bell. But not for me. This time it tolled for the lie, for the mask they wore, for the illusion that I had ever belonged to them. Later that week I met with Dahlia. She handed me a manila envelope. Congratulations, she said. The death certificate's been annulled. You're officially alive again. I smiled, signed the final form, and tore the old certificate in half. It felt like slicing through a second skin I never asked to wear. An investigation was already underway. Fraud, forgery, estate manipulation. The kind of charges you can't fake your way out of. But that wasn't my goal. Not revenge. Not even justice. Freedom. The kind that lets you breathe without apology. The kind that lets you walk into any room, any life, and say, "Yes, I'm here, and I will not vanish for anyone." Sometimes you have to die in someone else's story to be reborn in your own. And this time, I wasn't asking for space. I was claiming it. 1 week after the funeral, the one meant to bury me for good, I stood at the edge of the Arno River in Florence, watching the water move like time itself, smooth, relentless, cleansing. I had walked this same stretch of stone for years. Back when I thought I was forgotten. Back when I believed that silence was safer than the truth. But now, every step I took echoed with something new. Ownership. I didn't belong to anyone's story anymore. Not to Cecilia's curated version of sisterhood. Not to my parents' illusion of perfection. Not to the lie dressed up as mourning in St. Catherine's. I belonged to myself. Back in my apartment, the afternoon sun spilled across the kitchen table where I had laid out everything that was mine. Again, my reissued ID, the annulled death certificate in shredded pieces, and a letter from the Department of Vital Records confirming my status as, in their words, legally restored. Legally restored. But I wasn't interested in legalities. I was interested in something deeper. Wholeness. I opened my journal and wrote one sentence across a fresh page. They buried me, but I was the seed. That evening, I video called Eli. He looked tired, like he'd aged a little since we last spoke, but when he saw my face, his eyes softened. "You look real again," he said. "I feel it," I replied. He hesitated. "They're not doing well, you know. Cecilia's being audited. Your father's name is circling the board for possible removal. Your mother hasn't left the house." "I didn't go back to destroy them," I said gently. "I went back to stop pretending they hadn't already destroyed me." He nodded slowly. "Still, it mattered. That you stood there. That you said it out loud." Silence passed between us. Not awkward, just full. Finally, I said, "Tell me something honest." He smiled. "You scared the hell out of everyone?" I laughed for the first time in days. When the call ended, I stepped out onto the balcony. The city lights blinked on one by one like stars, returning to a sky that forgot how to hold them. Stood there for a long while, wrapped in the cool air, feeling something I hadn't let myself feel since before the betrayal. Peace. Not the kind that's given to you. The kind you carve out of the ruins with your bare hands and say, This is mine." And it was. This time, no one was writing my ending but me. Months passed, not quickly, not quietly, but with the deliberate, steady rhythm of healing, like bone knitting back together, slow and sure, stronger than before. I didn't chase headlines. I didn't give interviews. I let the story, my story, travel on its own, pass through whispers and digital footprints. People who once called themselves my family stopped calling anything at all. They vanished into the same silence they used to bury me. Only now, it was their turn to feel the weight of erasure. Cecilia lost her job after the investigation deepened. Fraud, perjury, financial misconduct. The press got wind of it when someone leaked her fake charity records, the one she'd started in my memory. The funds were frozen. The website went dark. My parents sold the house, quietly, No announcement, no goodbyes. They didn't reach out, but they saw me. They had to. I started speaking again, not about them, but about the truth, about how sometimes survival doesn't look like strength. It looks like vanishing. About how being a race doesn't make you less real. It makes you dangerous to the people who fear your voice. I shared pieces of the journey in small rooms, with women who had been silenced, with people who were told they didn't matter, with ghosts in their own families. And every time I said, "They tried to bury me, but I was never dead," something shifted in the room. People sat straighter, eyes welled up, spines remembered they were made of steel. One night, after a quiet event in Rome, a young woman came up to me. She was shaking, clutching a folded paper in her hand. "I haven't spoken to my mother in 6 years," she said. "She told everyone I left because I was unstable, that I needed help. But I was just different and inconvenient." She looked at me. "You reminded me I'm not invisible." I took the paper from her and held her gaze. "You never were." Later that night, I walked back to my apartment in silence. The streets of Rome glowed gold and soft under the lamps, and the world felt wider, somehow. Not because it had changed, but because I had stepped into it fully. For the first time, my story wasn't about what had been taken from me. It was about what I had taken back. My breath, my body, my voice, my name. Somewhere along the line, I stopped needing closure, because this wasn't a closed story. It was a beginning. And I, Vivian Cross, was no longer the girl who vanished in the silence. I was the woman who returned in the light and stayed. Sometimes they don't kill you with violence. They kill you with silence, with paperwork, with lies. But the most powerful resurrection isn't the kind they fear. It's the one they can't stop watching. Because when you rise in full light, when you take back your name, your breath, your voice, there's no lie big enough to bury you again. If this story touched something inside you, share it with someone who needs to remember you are not invisible. Tell us where you're tuning in from. And if you've ever felt erased, type 2 in the comments. If you've come back stronger, type 7 and say, "I'm here." And don't forget, like, subscribe, and come back tomorrow. Because the next story, it's about a woman who never thought she'd fight again, until someone took what she loved most. You won't want to miss it.